I want to share a couple of verses about why I believe in preparing for the Sabbath. And I will be honest with you, I don't always get to do it to prepare meals for the Sabbath. And that's unfortunate, but I do want to share these couple of things for your consideration. First is Exodus 16, starting in verse 22. It says, "Now on the sixth day they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each one. When all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, then he said to them, 'This is what the Lord meant. Tomorrow is a Sabbath observance, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake, and boil what you will boil, and all that is left over put aside to be kept until morning.' So they put it aside until morning as Moses had ordered, and it did not become foul, nor was there any worm in it. Moses said, 'Eat it today, for today is a Sabbath of the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the 7th day, the Sabbath, there will be none.' It came about on the seventh day that some of the people went out to gather, but they found none. Then the Lord said to Moshe, 'How long do you refuse to keep my commandments and my instructions? See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath, therefore he gives you bread for 2 days. On the 6th day, remain every man in his place. Let no man go out of his place on the 7th day.' So the people rested on the 7th day. The house of Israel named it manna, and it was like coriander seed, white, and its taste was like wafers and honey. Then Moses said, 'This is what the Lord has commanded. Let an omer of it be kept throughout your generations.' So basically they kept some of the manna and put it in a jar, but it shows that it wasn't there. And it says, 'Bake what you will bake and boil what you will boil.' And also, let's go real quick to Numbers 15, because this is just, and this particular thing happened, the incident happens just before he gives the instruction about tzitzit, tassels, which I think also helps illustrate why you wear them in the first place. Starting in verse 32 of chapter 15 in Numbers. "Now while the sons of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man gathering wood on the Sabbath. Those who found him gathering wood brought him to Moses and Aaron and all the congregation, and they put him in custody because it had not been declared what should be done with him. Then the Lord said to Moses, 'The man shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him with stones outside the camp.' So all the congregation brought him outside the camp and stoned him to death with stones, just as the Lord had commanded. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, 'Speak to the sons of Israel and tell them they shall make for themselves tassels on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, that they shall put on the tassel of each corner a cord of blue. It shall be a tassel for you to look at and remember all the commandments of the Lord, so as to do them and not follow after your own heart and your own eyes, after which you have played the harlot.' the Sabbath was a big part, and the Pharisees had perverted the Sabbath, and some of the things that they did saying you couldn't be healed, you couldn't heal on the Sabbath, you couldn't do all those things. That was part of oral Torah, and that's what Yeshua was arguing with them about. So now, let's also go to Nehemiah chapter 15. We'll start in verse 15. In those days I saw in Judah some who were treading wine presses on the Sabbath, and bringing in sacks of grain, and loading them on donkeys, as well as wine, grapes, figs, and all kinds of loads. And they brought them into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. So I admonished them on the day that they sold food. Also, men of Tyre were living there who imported fish and all kinds of merchandise and sold them to the sons of Judah on the Sabbath, even in Jerusalem. Then I reprimanded the nobles of Judah and said to them, "What is this evil thing you are doing by profaning the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers do the same, so that our God brought on us and on this city all of this trouble? You are adding to the wrath on Israel by profaning the Sabbath." It came about that just as it grew dark at the gates of Jerusalem before the Sabbath, I commanded that the doors should be shut and that they should not open them until after the Sabbath. Then I stationed some of my servants at the gates so that no load would enter on the Sabbath. Once or twice the traders and merchants of every kind of merchandise spent the night outside Jerusalem. Then I warned them and said to them, "Why do you spend the night in front of the wall? If you do so again, I will use force against you." From that time on, they did not come on the Sabbath. And I commanded the Levites that they should purify themselves and come as gatekeepers to sanctify the Sabbath. Sanctify being set apart, the Sabbath. For this also remember me, O God. For this also remember me, O God, and have compassion on me according to the greatness of your loving kindness. So this is hopefully this is some food for thought about what it means to profane the Sabbath. And I know it has to be a conviction. It's like head covering or beards or anything else. It's all about conviction. Everything becomes an obedience. And by the way, one of the things that Israel was kicked out of the land for was not obeying the Sabbaths of the land. They also had those Sabbaths of the land, the Shemitah years and the Jubilee years, that they did not obey, which is why they spent 70 years in Babylon. Why Judah spent 70 years in Babylon. So please consider these. I hope this is something that you will consider to look at as conviction and pray about and perhaps change in your life. You will find great blessing. There is great blessing in obedience. Obedience out of love. Not out of obligation, but out of love. Obedience, true, heartfelt obedience comes from love, not from obligation. Shalom, shalom, and I encourage you to read your Bible, and hopefully these things whet your appetite for the Bible. Shalom, shalom.